And now for our feature presentation.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?
You're listening to Straight Talk with Dean and Mark. Call in to join the conversation at 646-668-8393.
Welcome to Straight Talk with Dean and Mark. It's the six-man Dean Geronimo in the studio with Mark Lee, and we welcome you to yet another exciting episode of our show. We are here with no power in New Jersey, but it's a six-man Dean Geronimo from NJ to NC. I'm in the studio with Mark Lee. So, Mark, tell me what's good in your neck of the woods, my brother.
Well, I got two questions for you. One is I want to know what kind of trip you had, because I know that you went over there to, I believe it was Costa Rica, and you come back and you got no power. So, I mean, you got it from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum. So you got to tell me exactly what was going on with that kind of thing happening in your life. And I know the trip had to be amazing. So definitely let me and the listeners know how that trip was and how much you enjoyed it, and if you're going back.
You know what? I wouldn't mind going back, man. We flew into Liberia, Costa Rica, stayed at Playa El Jobo La Cruz, Guanacaste, which is in Costa Rica, Dreams La Marias, and had an outstanding time. My sister got married, man, so shout out to Dana and Umar as the two became one. We had a very beautiful time. It rained. The rain over there is like 5 minutes, and then it's sunshining, so didn't miss anything that was happening over here. Our flight got delayed coming back. We spent like an hour or so in D.C. before we came back to Newark, and today was all right until about an hour ago. Heard the rain falling, heard the wind blow a little bit, and next thing you know, the power was out, and I'm like, here we go, man, like right when I have
that's the way
something
things go
do.
sometimes. But I bet you, when you were in Costa Rica, even though it was probably a little warm there as well, you did not miss the heat, because as we'll be talking about, because I know two of my guests are here in the Triangle area with me, we've been coping with like 100-degree temperatures, so it's been sizzling around here. They say we're supposed to get some rain too. Hopefully it won't knock off our power, but they say we're supposed to get some rain and everything, and then after that comes, hopefully it will cool it down, because I have definitely got out and about and done, as I usually do, some fun and amazing things, but it was still hot as all get out while I was doing them, and unfortunately, a lot of these things that I got to do were in the evening time. So, we have our art walk kind of thing that we do called Third Friday. So I went to a couple of the galleries, including the Truth to Power exhibit at what was Pleiades, even though I think they're in the process of changing their name, but saw some amazing art that dealt with social change and things of that nature. My dad actually put up one of his artworks, but it was kind of a renegade guerrilla artwork that he put up, because it's talking about how we give a little bit of play to this whole thing about wanting people to give thoughts and prayers whenever there's a disaster. So he put up like those little fire alarm kind of things that you strike, and the thing is, basically thoughts and prayers. So his whole concept of this artwork was that a lot of times people, whether it's the migrant situation, whether it's these other things, we need more than thoughts and prayers. We need actual action. So I think that was kind of a principal message of what he was talking about with that artwork. So, art can definitely be a very powerful tool. So he put up 8 art bombs, and I looked on his Facebook page, and he said, look out, there might be some more art bombs being dropped around. Like he said, many of the places looked at him when he did it with a wink and a smile, and they were not having any intention of taking it down. There is at least one corporate spot that we are pretty much sure took it down, and who knows about the other spots. But, sometimes you have to use art as a tool in terms of making powerful statements. So went there, and then I met a brother who bought a spot, Puerto Rican brother, bought a spot in downtown, and he's got he's a photographer, and he's also got Riptown Photography is the name of his company, but he was having some musicians up there and some other artists, and he's actually got prime property for not too bad a price in downtown, trying to maintain it and to build an art kind of collective kind of thing that he's doing. So it was real fun talking to that gentleman that was doing that, and I was hanging out with my buddy Calvin, and then we stopped at Copa's, which is a Old Havana. The couple that used to own Old Havana now owns Copa and has owned it, I think, for about maybe a year and a half or maybe a little bit around that time frame. So stopped in there, had some food with them, chopped it up with them in terms of conversation. But we just had a good old time on that particular evening. And actually Elizabeth Turnbull, who runs Lighthouse Messaging, I believe that's the name of the company, but it's a publishing company. And she's done some amazing stuff with our literary community around the area. And even though her husband has a child and a grown child, they are having their first child together. So I believe the child is due like around October or something like that. So she's definitely, they're having their first child together. So she's all excited about that. And, of course, they've been running multiple businesses together. So this will be like something else that they'll be part of their family dynamic. So just really good to see Elizabeth. Hadn't seen her in a minute. And so it was really good to see her. And then on Saturday, we had the Poetry Slam. And, of course, those poets, as always, were amazing. The winner gets to go to one of the solo competitions, and this one will be held in San Diego. I believe it's international competition, or has international in the title, but they will definitely be going there. So Breeze, Hassan, and Ali were all going head-to-head. Breeze took the title, so he will be representing Haiti on that particular day. So had a chance to go there. You know, we've had Jillian on the show before, and so she was having a event for a progressive group of progressives that are around the country, actually, and it's an organization that she's part of, and so she was having a fundraiser for that at an arcade. So I ducked my head in that arcade on Saturday, Boxcar. There's one of those in Raleigh, I believe one in Greensboro, and this is the one in Durham. I had not been there, but hey, they got foosball, and they got like the little toss of the basketball, so they will be seeing me again in the not-too-distant future. Right next door is Urban Axe, where you throw an axe like you're in the medieval times, but you're throwing it like, at a target, things of that nature. I'm not too sure I want to go throwing axes because I don't know whether my aim is going to be all that good. There's also a bar, so, mixing alcohol and axes sounds like an interesting concept, but I'm not too sure that I really want to go there.
I don't think I want to do that either. Stay on the safe side and just, watch somebody else throw it on a screen or something, but not standing right beside them, not too close, because if that thing slips, man, you know what? It'll be a bad thing.
It would be a bad thing. And I know we've got our guests on, so before we get to them, I do have a couple of just really amazing things that I need to talk about. One is on a sad note, I hate to say, but yesterday we had several of our church services. Christ Central, which is always meeting at Hayti, was there, and then Damien had his Holy Tabernacle, which is a once-a-month service, which is more of an Afrocentric kind of service, as I've said on this show before. But as I was coming home, I was waiting at the bus stop because, I do the mass transit thing, and lady stopped by and was talking to me, and it turns out that it was Eric Perry. You remember James Eric Perry? He was on this show before, but she was informing me that back in April, Eric had passed away. So even though he had done that amazing thing in terms of the powerlifting, pulling a whole plane with his body and things of that nature, he did have some health issues that were going on. Apparently he fell down and they tried to revive him, but they were not able to revive him. But, we sometimes wonder if the things that we do touch the community and things of that nature, because I don't know whether it's this, whether it's newspapers or whatever. Sometimes you just feel like you might be whistling in the wind and wondering if anybody's listening. But she did tell me that I had recommended that he be a subject for a documentary, and that some of the things that we had talked about, I'm thinking that she might have meant some of the stuff on this show, as well as some of the stuff that I had written in the past, was what she used to frame her obituary. And it's also, they played the documentary that Southern Documentary, not the Southern Documentary Fund, but that the folks at the documentary organization here in Durham, the Center for Documentary Studies, had done on him. So they actually played that as part of the service, and from what she told me, it really moved people. So, sometimes we wonder if all of this stuff that we do in terms of letting people know about the positive things that folks are doing is making an impact. But in this case, I got to hear from her that it was making an impact, and that really moved me.
Right, indeed, and prayers go out to his family. Also, prayers go out to one of my hometown people, the family. Anthony Parham passed away this weekend, and I thought some prayers are with you. One amp, when we see you again, my soldier, you know, we'll party one more time. But what I'm gonna do is, because I see this thing lighting up here, and I see more than one. I see more than one phone call. I'm trying to get to them all. But what I'm going to do is put on a song real quick and find out who's actually standing by. And then after the commercial, we'll go ahead and get into the show. All right? So
sounds like a plan to me.
Indeed, man. It's Straight Talk with Dean and Mark. Y'all, we'll be back in 1 second.
Bass players, best thing you can do for your overall sound. You've got to see this. New Basstone Incorporated makes Nightwalker bass guitar tube preamps. This preamp will give your sound such a boost, it's just incredible. Try it today. Try it today now. A great sounding bass guitar will make for a great sounding band. Make your band sound at its best. Best thing you can do for your bass guitar sound. NewBassTone.com. NewBassTone.com.
All right, y'all. Thanks for holding on. We do have Commissioner Brenda Howerton on the line. Welcome to Straight Talk with Dean and Mark, ma'am. Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you doing, Commissioner Howerton? This is Mark on the other line over here. So I was just telling Dean over there, because he's up in New Jersey and coping with a power outage, but he unfortunately or fortunately had the benefit of going on a world trip, because he was also recently in Costa Rica. I believe he said it was for his sister's wedding and everything. But in terms of what you've been involved with, I've known you as long as I've known you for a number of years as being a great activist, definitely somebody that is concerned about education and things of that nature. So I was just wondering if you could talk to our listeners a little bit about what got you involved on the political spectrum. Because like I said, I've always known you to be an activist, so I don't even know what the first thing that drew you into this world was, or if it was something that you thought you were going to do when you were a youngster growing up in, I believe you grew up in rural North Carolina. I knew I did, and I think we had that conversation once before. So I don't know if this was like a vision of yours all your life, or if there were certain things in your life that drove you to doing this kind of work.
Well, it was definitely not a vision that I thought about doing all my life. It was nothing that I even considered. To me, it was just not where I wanted to go. I had 4 children, and my job was to raise them and make sure they had a good education. That's what I saw myself doing, and what drove me in this direction was tragedies that happened in my life, and trying to get information and banging on the door, and nobody would give me information. So at some point I decided, I was going to stop banging on the door and go inside the door.
That makes a lot of sense. Would you share with our listeners, because not everybody I'm aware of some of what that tragedy was, but not everybody that's listening is aware of those tragedies. And I don't want you to, like, if it's going to bring up too much pain, but if you would just share with our listeners a little bit about what that tragedy was that kind of got you involved in this, I would appreciate that.
Well, I'm a mother of 4 children and sent them all to college as a divorced mom, and had one son at Hampton University that was having a Martin Luther King celebration for the students on campus at one of the hotels there, and a Navy officer came in, started a fight with one of his friends. My son intervened and put him out. He went to his car, got his gun, and came back and shot him and killed him. So that took a year and a half of fighting up and down the road, trying to make sure that that young man was tried for murdering my son. And then a year and a half later, another knock on the door in Durham, where my youngest son was in Greensboro at A&T, and he'd had an emotional upset, walked out in the street with no clothes on, and a police officer shot and killed him. So it was out of tragedy that I ended up here, a lot of prayer, meditation, and fighting for not just my children, but other children as well. And what I saw during that whole chaotic experience was that we were losing a lot of our black and brown children.
Yeah, and we still continue to lose a lot of them. And I know that that's just a very important issue to you, is ways that we can find to not lose these children on a regular basis, because it seems like every time you turn around, there's another tragedy with somebody being lost, whether it's at the hands of a police officer or at the hands of their fellow peers, or even at the hands of other societies and cultures. But where did you find the strength to deal with these issues when they first happened to you? Because I can't even imagine. I have no kids, but I know if Malik was to call me, my younger brother, and tell me that anything had happened to my nephews, I would be utterly devastated, and I don't know how I would handle it, or if I would even be able to handle it. And like I said, he's the one that deals with them on a regular basis. I probably need to deal with them even more than I do. But I was just wondering, even just knowing that, because they're my blood in the sense of my brother's kids and everything, I don't even know how I would handle that. So how were you? Where did you find the inner strength to deal with that?
Mark, the only thing I can tell you is only by the grace of God. Because when I wanted to drive my car off the side of the road, and literally that was what was present to me at that moment, and the other side of my brain said, you can do that if you want, but you're not going to die, because I have work for you to do. So I didn't drive off the side of the road. I drove on down the road from Greensboro, and I have been working ever since. What was there was, okay, my 2 boys, beautiful boys, are gone. I can't bring them back no matter how hard I fight. But there are a lot of other young people out here that I can fight for, a lot of seniors that need me to stand for them. So my life is really about, I told somebody the other day that I wake up in the morning and I strap up. Let's go.
Well,
what is it that we need to fight for? What's the issue? What is the policy? What is it that we need to stand for today so that people have a little bit better life?
And there's so many issues that are going on in society, in particular around Durham, but around the nation as well. And I was just wondering, what are some of those issues that are really driving you right now? Because I know a lot of people right here in Durham are talking about, things like gentrification, which is definitely an issue, not just here, but in New Jersey, in places like Seattle, in places throughout the area. But that's just one of many. I know a lot of people are also not that thrilled with the school to prison pipeline that we seem to be having going on right now. But what are some of the issues that are really touching you on a regular basis that are some of those issues that you feel driven to fight for on a regular basis?
Well, gun violence is always going to be that snatches at my heart. You know, when somebody takes a gun and takes the life of someone, it not just impacts that particular mother or father, or mother and father, it impacts the siblings that we don't talk a lot about. It impacts the community. It impacts the kids that they go to school with. So there are a lot of victims from one shooting. So that's one of the things, that people be paid a wage that they can live. They can't live in Durham. You can't live on $15 an hour. You can't live on $8 an hour. Affordable housing. Where are you going to live when the medium income in Durham is, I think I heard the other day, is around $55,000 a year? We still have a lot of people that don't make that much money. So they end up in the gap that we provide from the county is social services. And there are people that will say they are pulling on the system. Well, we don't want them to pull on the system. We want them to have adequate income so that they can provide for themselves. We do with the Durham Tech. We have an awful lot of training programs and educational programs where they can go and get a certification so that they can work and make more than $8 an hour. But I can't imagine living off of $8 an hour.
Yeah, I mean, I've found it's really hard to, and I'm also amazed at how much, even in whether it's Durham, whether it's New York City, whether it's Miami or other parts of the country, how we, this is 2019, and we still seem to have an issue with folks having, as you just said, places to stay. Because I've got a friend of mine, and we've actually had him on the show before, that was on the verge of being evicted from his apartment complex, and he's had some people doing some work, but even now he's almost on like a day-to-day kind of basis of trying to survive and trying to figure out a way to make ends meet in order to pay his bills. And I've run a couple of people even near here where I live live in Duke Manor, but near the Duke campus and everything. And there are people that I see on a regular basis that are telling me that, they're homeless, might be living on a bridge, living underneath on some of our church grounds and things of that nature. And it just seems that that's just so crazy for that to be happening in 2019. I mean, it was probably crazy for it to be happening way back when, but for folks to be telling me these kind of things, I'm just wondering what can we do to address these issues, and what are some of your thoughts on like the housing crisis and some of the things that are going on? I know that there have been some plans that are put out by like the mayor of Durham and others about trying to make sure that we have affordable housing, but I don't know what impact that will have until we build those things for those people that are facing the struggles now. Because like I know we've got that grounds that'll be built soon at the bus terminal, but that's going to be another 2 years from now if we're lucky?
Nothing happens fast. Not fast enough. People need housing right now. The county, Durham County just passed, and we just secured contractors for the 300 block and the 500 block of Main Street to build affordable and workforce housing. Now, that doesn't happen overnight. Yeah, I would love for it to happen, show up in 30 to 60 days. But there's no way it's going to happen. It takes planning, and it's a process. So in the county, that's not something we normally get involved in with housing because it's usually under the city. But we saw the need, and we had the land, and we took on the possibility of creating affordable housing in those areas. So the city is looking at this bond.
Hey guys, want to get rid of
more.
that cable bill?
I don't know what that was.
That was a mistake on Dee's part, so keep on going.
You know what? Yeah, keep going. I'm sorry about that. We have, trying to improvise over here with no power, and I got all kinds of stuff going on. Pardon that, man.
So the city does most of the housing prospects in Durham, and we normally, for the county, counties usually take on the soft surfaces, the social services and the health department, extension, corporate extension, and the sheriff and the jail. Not really the sheriff, but the jail process. So we take on a lot of different things in the city, economic development, but we've also combined a lot of things as well.
Yeah, and I was wondering about that because I know that in the past there's always been talk about, and I think we might have done it with the school system, but definitely there's been conversations for a number of years about, say, trying to merge the county and the city in terms of law enforcement. And it's one that has had, that is something that they were definitely interested in, what our law enforcement is doing. Is that something that you think we should be pushing for? Because I know there's been a conversation where people have talked about why do we have like the Durham Police and the Durham County
Best
Sheriff?
Best thing you can do for your overall sound.
Dude, this thing is going crazy over here. Keep going. My fault.
So the police and the sheriff, so you're looking at two different entities here. The sheriff is elected by the people. We have no control over the sheriff. That's been really, really hard for people to understand. We, as the county elected officials, have no control. The sheriff is the most powerful person, elected person in your county. The police is hired by the city council.
Right.
So it's just a totally different perspective there. We are responsible as county commissioners. We're responsible for the jail to make sure the jail runs properly and has the resources that it needs. But we do not control the sheriff.
Well, and how do you think we're doing in terms of that? Because I know that there have been a number of activists that have talked about the jail system that have complained about incidences, not just here in Durham, but in Raleigh and other places where inmates have been felt that they did not get enough care, or family members felt that they did not get enough care in the cases where they may have died while under the watch of the prison system or whatever. So you think we do a good enough job in terms of taking care of those that are unfortunately put in that kind of situation, meaning that they're locked up in the jail system?
Well, there's always more to do. There's always more to do. If someone's child dies in our jail, I grieve. I'm going to always be with the mom and the dad. My heart is just going to go there. That's just the way it is. And the question for us is, are we doing all that we can as elected officials and that provide the resources for our jail to make sure that they have what they need? Do they have the training? Do they have the facility? Do they have the medical care? All of that we have to look at to see what else and there have been times where there needed to be some things improved, and we've improved on a lot of them, and we will continue to improve on things that the sheriff brings to us that need to be improved upon.
Yeah, and I think that y'all have done an amazing job. Friends, not just with you, but with some of the other county commissioners, as well as others that are in different political offices and things of that nature. But they're always talking to me about different things that they are concerned about with the county, and definitely the housing has been one that is on people's minds, and also the whole thing with controlling which developers come into town. Is that strictly a city issue, or is that something that the county commissioners, through economic development planning and stuff like that, get to put their voices in as well? Because I'm not sure about that.
Okay, I'm not sure what the question was about.
The question was economic development, what role the county commissioner plays with that in terms of economic development, not just throughout the county, but in terms of like when we're having conversations with developers and trying to make sure that they're making sure the minority developers are hired, as well as making sure that it's going to impact the community in a great way. What role does the county commissioner play with that?
Well, we play a large role as far as economic development. We county government is an extension of state government. So there are certain rules that are placed on us that we can't do anything about. So as far as incentives and as far as looking to see is it a fit for our community, and if it's a fit for our community, what is the company offering for our community as far as the community people being hired, community involvement, all of those things we're looking and asking those kinds of questions. And it's okay to do that, but there are some legalities that we can't do anything about. We've got some rules that have been placed on us that we just have to let it go.
Right. There's certain things that you can't do because of what the state has put on you in terms of their rules and regulations.
Yeah,
so that makes
we
a
have
lot of sense.
we have an attorney, our county attorney, that advises us that this is okay. We can push it here, push it there, but certain areas we can't push.
Good. And you recently got elected to a statewide office as well. Could you tell us, our listeners, a little bit about what that office is and how this will play into what you can do on maybe even a state level? Because I know that you were recently sworn in as president of the North Carolina Association of Counties, which I'm assuming this is all the people involved around the area.
Mark, thank you. That was such an honor to be sworn in by 100 counties across the state to be chosen as their president of the state association. And for Durham, that had never happened before. It was the first time anyone had that honor. And I've learned what it means to go from Murphy to Matteo. There are some, and we have some really, really rural counties in this state that need all the help that they can get.
I actually grew up in Warren County.
Yeah, I grew up in Caswell County, so I know rural. I know, and visiting those areas, we can't do enough in educating our children, educating our young people so that they have a chance in life. The great equalizer is education. And if we have to continue to improve so that from universal pre-K to college, that our young people have an opportunity to have a life.
Yes. And how do you think we're doing in terms of educating people just about the duty of civics? Because, I know that we're in a very tumultuous time in terms of our national politics and things of that nature, but it seems to me that I'm just amazed the amount of times that you talk to people that will tell you they haven't voted or that they have no interest in voting or that the candidates won't make any difference to them. Even sometimes the local candidates, which we often know that it's actually at the local level is the ones that oftentimes impact us even more than the national level. But I'm just amazed sometimes at the lack of interest by some of our youngsters and even some of our folks in the middle age and the elders that are not interested in the political spectrum. So I was wondering, have you had that experience, and what has been your reaction, and how have you coped with that?
Well, I do my best to educate individuals when they don't seem to have an interest in voting, and I talk about voting for people that have their interests and their values at heart. Their vote counts when it comes to education. Their vote counts as far as job development in this community. Their vote counts when it comes to their taxes. Those are things that they can relate to. Their vote counts when it comes to whether seniors have food to eat or not. Those are things that they can relate to. You know, there's a lot of other things, but those things they can get on board with that.
Yep. What is one of the most amazing things? Like I said, like you mentioned before, it was a tragedy that brought you into the political spectrum. You've been in the political spectrum now for a number of years. But what, other than what I just mentioned about some people that may not understand the importance of politics, what have been some of the other things that have shocked you or that surprised you about being involved as a civic leader and a political leader?
I guess today I think the thing that's shocking me right now is the divisiveness.
Wow.
You know, we need leaders. Our children need to see leaders that are working together for their good, not being divisive. How do we teach our young people that they are supposed to work together, they are supposed to respect one another, irregardless of what they look like or how much money they have? How do we teach our children that if we are not representing that? Because our kids will model us. And if we're not giving them what they need to model, then shame on us.
Yeah, because I know in this show, we've had a conversation with some of the young leaders, both in Raleigh as well as Durham and even around the nation. And part of the conversation has been that sometimes they feel that, and it's all a two-way street, and they even acknowledge that it's a two-way street, that sometimes the younger leaders feel that they're not getting enough respect from the old guard, as they might consider it. But then the old guard probably feels that the young folks are being a little bit too much of making too many gains and aren't listening to their voice as well. And I've had some of the young leaders acknowledge that they have to listen to the voice of the wisdom of their elders, but they also would like to have their voice heard as well. And I know a good friend of mine that actually lives out of state in the West Coast. They sometimes talk about AOC over there representing New York, and they feel that sometimes that she hasn't done enough in terms of had that track record yet. That she came out kind of on fire and making changes and making proposals, but that she hadn't had a chance to really build her own track record yet. So I do see that conversation going on a regular basis, even sometimes within our PACs and things of that nature. So I was wondering how you've dealt with that, trying to build the bridges, because you are one of the people that I have seen do a great job of building bridges in the community, because I've seen you talk to everybody from Democrats and Republicans, gay and straight, white and black, Latin and Asian, just across the board, Christian and Muslim.
I love hearing different perspectives. It helps me to grow. None of us know everything. Nobody knows everything. I don't care who you are. PhD, whatever PhD you have. Nobody knows everything. I learn from young people. I love hanging out with them. I love their energy. So there's a wisdom that comes with people that are older, but there's creativity that comes with young people. And just being able to respect each is amazing.
Yeah, definitely. If you would tell our listeners, and I'm going to bring in a couple of our other callers, and I do want you to stay on if you can, but tell folks that are listening what Howerton Consulting is, because I do know you have Howerton Consulting, but I don't even know exactly what y'all do, but what that is, and also if people are interested, how they can reach you. So definitely let folks know what Howerton Consulting does, and if folks are interested, how they can reach you. And then the other question I have to ask you is, are we going to be just satisfied with the county commissioner and his state job, or do we have ambitions to make it a little bit bigger, maybe on the state or the federal level?
So, Howerton Consulting is an executive coaching firm. I am an executive coach. You know, as an elected official, you still have to work. I still have to pay my mortgage. So I'm an executive coach that I work with people to move to another level of expertise. If they are at one level, they may have plateaued and want to move to another level. So I work with individuals that want to improve where they are to move, or they may even want to move to another job. But it's all about creating a strategy that have them move to another level. I've been doing that since the early 90s. And also a part of that is leadership development, is working with companies, mid-level managers around leadership development. And what was that other question?
I was asking whether you were just going to be, you've done so much here in this Durham area. I didn't know if you had any ambitions to do anything on the state or the federal level, because I could definitely see you running some office on a state or a federal level.
Well, thank you. That's an honor to hear. I loved being the president of the association and being able to connect with so many different commissioners and folks from around the state, and being involved in my local home issues, but also being issues that were in other counties, and seeing that when you build those relationships, you can push for issues together. So I've built those relationships over the years, and a lot of those relationships in Raleigh right now. So whether I move on to anything else or stay here, wherever I am, I'll just do the best job I can for the people, no matter where it is.
And you've always done an amazing job for the people and things of that nature. If you could definitely stay on the line, I would definitely appreciate that. But I think I had one or two more callers. Dean, did I still have Hope on?
Yep, she's still standing by, and she will be in one quick second.
Thank you.
The old Renaissance is the new Renaissance, standing on tradition while embracing the spirit of distinction. This is the Harlem Brewing Company. Uniquely crafted beer brewed to deliver a taste, a sound, and a feeling that can only be described one way, Harlem style. So come and take a trip on the A train with our Harlem Sugar Hill Golden Ale and our Harlem Renaissance Wit Beer, the neighborhood original.
Okay, well, we talk with Dean and Mark. Hope Love, you are on the line. Good evening.
Good evening.
Hey, Hope, how are you doing?
Hey, Mark, how are you?
I'm doing good. We have Brenda on the line as well. You know, Brenda's definitely been involved on the political circuit, but you've been involved on an issue that is very important to her as well, and that is the whole issue of education. Because when I think of theater educators here in this area, of course, there is the legendary Wendell Tabb, who I'm hoping to have on the show in the future.
Oh, my God,
But we've also got Hope Love that's been doing it not quite as long, but almost as long as Mr. Tabb has.
When we used to work in Durham at our meetings, Wendell used to be the only person who would lean in. Everybody else would lean back. I would say something in the meeting. Wendell and I go way back. And he and I were simpatico when everybody else was like, whoa, I didn't see the lean out of this conversation. So I defer to being a mentee of his, but only by a year or two. He just looks better than me. That's why you think he's older.
You still look amazing yourself as well, so don't even go there. But what drives you into education in terms of theater education? And as I mentioned earlier, I was talking about my dad's art bombs earlier that he dropped around different art galleries. I've always been one to believe that the arts can definitely be something that we use in terms of change and in terms of making change. I've even seen artists, including some very radical artists, that have even done theater pieces at like city council and commissioner meetings. So how important has art been to you, and what does that mean to you and everything?
So I've always been a rabble-rouser, and I've always been a storyteller, and I think theater education was not what I thought I would do, like Commissioner Howerton was saying. And by the way, thank you, ma'am, for your work in the city over the last 15, 20 years. It is not an easy city, but it is certainly a city that rewards you if you serve it. So thank you.
Thank you.
As a citizen of Durham, thank you. But theater education was not in my path, right? Like where you end up is never where you think you're going. And I think that that's one of the things when I teach my high school students, they get all bound up at 15 about making the decision that will affect the course of their life adversely or, to the positive. I'm like, it doesn't matter. You're going to end up where you're going to end up. It all shakes out. So relax. Just take the next step. I wanted to be a priest, right? I wanted to be a priest. They asked me at 7 years old. I was raised Catholic. Sister Ann asked me what I wanted to be before our first communion, and I said I want to be a priest. And she says, "No, dear, I think you mean a nun." And I said, "No, the nuns have ugly costumes." And so she sent me crying to Father Charles, and at the time, the only thing that I could do on the altar was be a lector. I couldn't even be an altar boy. This is, 76, 77? And so they built a little stand for me, and because I couldn't reach the book, I had to memorize it. So I had an acting gig every week from 7 to, 19. So a lot of singers get their start in church. I got my acting start in church because I was reading on the altar. I mean, I played Jesus in the Passion from the time I was 11 to the time I was 23.
Now, you can get me into all kinds of trouble. You can get me to all kinds of trouble, Hope, and I'm probably going to go there because, a lot of people, when they go to church, they probably are thinking to themselves that some of the people on the church pulpit are some of the best actors of all time, because some of them are giving great messages, but we don't necessarily know that they're living the message that they're preaching. So
but I mean, I
some
didn't
people
do it for that. But that when you say what you got into, for me, and my husband called me out on this a couple of years ago. He says, well, you realize you're still a priest, right? You're just preaching the gospel of stories can change people's hearts. It's the same thing. It's just a different story. And I was like, oh, yeah, kind of. Because I think one of the things that drew me to a Judeo-Christian background and draws me to education is, at least in America, the theology is that every democratic citizen needs to be armed with a full and free education to be able to handle the rights and responsibilities of being a citizen. And it's really the last time we put everybody together and we go, you got to figure it out. You don't get to say these people don't come. You don't get to say we don't, you don't get to gate yourself away from the citizenry. This is the next generation of citizenry. Figure it out. And I think it's a super important thing, and it's how I run my theater program, is that story is a way that we talk about our problems, we talk about our aspirations, and then have a collective conversation as a community, right? And with high school theater, with young people, you're talking about the respect, for young people to say, we're struggling with these things, we think this way about the world, and they're not saying that in isolation. I think one of the things that's difficult about social media and the conversations that young people are having on social media, even in activism, even in social change, is that they're in an echo chamber, right? Theater, you got an audience, and that audience will give you back. One of the most powerful experiences a kid talked about in doing theater with me, we were doing the Laramie Project, and we kept the lights on in the house. We did not turn the house lights down, which you don't think is a big deal, but it was very unsettling for the audience. They're like, wait a second, we're supposed to be disappeared. And they were all their reactions, all their responses were broadcast back. And they could see who was crying. They could see who was, sucking their teeth. And one of my performers said, being able to see, my mom, her face soften at parts of the play that I didn't think she would soften, made me brave about telling her certain things about me that I had not been brave about. Like I got informed about my mom in a way that I was not informed before. And I think that feedback loop and opening yourself to that feedback loop in a citizenry is really important. And I think that it's atrophying quickly. And so I used to think that it was important to have my kids learn their own voice. And I actually think now I'm turning my eye to talking them, thinking about how to use those skills to speak together with respect, speak to each other with respect.
Because how do you think we're doing in terms of like teaching the importance of art and theater? That's one of the things that we've talked about with other guests on this show, is that sometimes it feels like it's being lost in the mix, because I know a lot of art programs have been cut by a variety of things, but definitely on the state and the federal level. And then that raises the question, are our kids learning enough about critical thinking? Because to me, that is a very vital part of developing your critical thinking ability.
Oh, this is such a complex question. So, if you had, I'm a Marva Collins girl, okay? Give me three, you know who Marva Collins was? Marva Collins was a woman who didn't think Chicago city schools were servicing her child and other children well, and so she took like 5 of them that nobody would want, put them in a back storage room in her apartment, and like taught them. If you have a 5-to-1 student ratio, there is a student-teacher ratio, there is nothing you can't do. But we don't have that ratio in our schools. So just like Commissioner Howerton said, you do with what you are allotted, right? Mm-hmm. The same as the county commissioners are like, the state's only giving us this much money, so we got to do with what we got. So we get schools in a position of, we got to do with what we got, right? And we also have the line that we are starting, because of the economic gap, we are starting to have more and more people earlier on in their trajectory of education worried about the investment of their time for financial gain later. So it used to be that the high school education was about really building a citizen, and now it's about building the building blocks for your financial security. And so I don't know how, and the arts are not funded, right? Like, even at the highest level, there are many theaters in this area where it would be more prestigious for me as an artist to work, and it would cut my salary in half. So when somebody jokingly says to me, oh, we'd love to have you here at blah, 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 but we can't afford you, they're not kidding. And it's why you have a continuation of people of affluence and of a strain of race and a strain of gender running arts organizations, because they're the only people who can last through the 10 years of $15,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year jobs with no health benefits, with no retirement benefits, because they have other means. They either are, they can survive it. And so it's very hard for me to tell an immigrant child who they are going to be the breadwinner for their family, because their family sacrificed everything to get them here, to go study at an MFA at Juilliard, even if they're good enough, knowing that there's a whole Broadway, off-Broadway movement about people going bankrupt working on Broadway. So which one do you want to change, right? Like, I would love it that we don't have to start worrying about the commodification of education until you're 18. That would be a good solution, right? So it's hard when you talk about economics, but do I think that the mindset of art should be infused in everything? Absolutely. Does that mean that you need more staff members per child? Because I don't know what I'm going in to teach. I'm unlocking each of my students as an individual puzzle. I can't bubble that. And bubble testing them is cheaper. Let's not talk about how it's standardized. It's just cheaper to score because you can standardize critical thinking testing. It's what they do with AP, but it costs a whole bunch of money. So that's that's how I answer that question. I'm sorry if that was far too complex an answer rather than, yes, the art should be supported. Everybody should take an art. Yes. Yes.
No, that was actually
but
what
not
I was looking
everybody
for.
has the luxury. I would like our system to give everybody the luxury. No, I think the way to solve that is put in. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought that up because I know that even on Facebook, and I think it's definitely a Durham group, or maybe even a Triangle group, but I would argue it's probably even a national group called Art Ain't Innocent, and that's part of what their whole conversation has been, is this conversation about the fact that these are artists of all kinds of varieties, everything from film, well, from theater to literary to artists that are doing more visual arts and photography and things of that nature. I know my dad is part of that group, but that's part of the conversations they've been having, is that they're tired of the people that you were just talking about, the administrators that can afford, that are making like X amount of money or that are getting crazy amount of money from either the county or the state or whatever, but then they're turning around and not paying the artists what they feel are at least survivable wages. So they sometimes feel that the
what's the first money that gets cut in the schools?
Right. I mean, the state, right? The state did a great thing because it looks great. They made an elementary school. They made a 1 to 22, 1 to 24. They mandated that. But then if you're going to mandate that, you need to up the budget for teacher allotment. Because when you don't do those things in conjunction, you get very generous counties like Durham, like Wake, like Orange County, who have the resources. They fill in the gap, right? Yep. Brenda Howerton does her job for our Durham children. And those kids still have a music teacher in elementary school. But in Warren County, that's not happening. And that's not on the county commissioners. That's not on the principals in those schools. That is on the state legislature that talks out of one side of their mouth with their philosophy and the other side of their mouth with their pocket. So there you are.
Go ahead. Preach, sister. Preach.
Well, I told you.
So, Brenda, just out of curiosity, then I'll get back to some more questions to Hope as well. Did you ever think, when you were a kid, you said what you didn't think you were going to be in politics and everything. Did you ever have any aspirations of doing anything in the arts? Or what was the job that you thought you were going to do when you were a kid?
I was going to be a teacher. That's what I always thought I was going to be. It was a teacher.
But see, I think
so.
I guess the same thing.
Yeah, I guess I do it in a different way. I'm not in the classroom, so I coach.
And coaching is a form of teaching.
Yes, it is, and also I'm always working. Wherever I can work with young people in school, I'm always talking to them about what does county government do? What does it mean for them? How does it impact your dads and your moms? Yep. And when I start talking about the taxes, when I start talking about the food, that the environmental health, have to inspect restaurants so that when you go into that restaurant, if you don't see a 97 point something, tell your parents to go, you don't want to eat there. Sometimes the parents call me and say, my kid don't want to eat anywhere I take them. said the numbers are not high enough. The commissioner said the numbers are not high enough, so the food is not right.
But that's you educating the kids and their parents that getting educated at the same time. So a lot of times we need
true.
that kind of
I
education.
mean, that's what you want to be as a teacher, is you want to be that voice in their head, right?
Yeah.
Because when you're the voice in their head, it means that they've taken the information you gave them and translated it into their own network, into their own understanding of the world. That they went, that's important. I think that's important. Not that other people outside of me think that's important. Other people agree with me, and I think that's important.
Yeah. And me and Dean have talked about on this show the fact that we remember, and I was actually a fairly good kid, so I didn't have to remember it that well, but definitely friends of mine that were not that well behaved and everything. It seems to me that we also remember the days when you were not just raised by yourself, you were raised by the neighborhood. I mean, people may have taken that Clinton cliche of it takes a village to raise a child as just that as a cliche, but it definitely seems that it was very much of a truism. And I was just wondering, do you think that we've gotten away from that? Because I'm wondering if social media and just the electronic things that are out there, and also people's fear, because people are afraid to like make a comment if they see somebody in a cafeteria or in a grocery store misbehaving with their child. They're afraid to make a comment to them because they're afraid that they'll, one, get cussed out, and two, that it might come back with retribution on them.
Well,
so true.
I don't know. I have thoughts about that. First of all, I think that we don't have communities anymore where there really is a village. I think you have enclaves. And I think that's different than, and I think all three of us, right, have a really rural background.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think in Durham you experience that, right? Like my child experiences that in our, literally our little enclave, right? There's nobody in my neighborhood that isn't going to go, young man. But everybody in my neighborhood, either through an intersection of education or through an intersection of economics or even mostly political beliefs, is kind of the same, right? Like I live in kind of a and the way our housing market is right now, most of our neighbors are homogenous, right? I mean, gentrification, at least for a little bit, you get neighborhoods that are not, and you see the kind of conflicts that arise from, heterogeneous neighborhoods, right? Like, and so for me, I think the bigger difficulty is that our relationship with technology has made us transactional even when we have relationships with people. And I'm seeing that more and more with parents and more with students at the education level. That you used to be build a relationship with your students, and then when things come up like conflicts, they treat you like someone you know.
Right.
That's happening less and less. That when you have a relationship with people, they think they can treat you the way they treat people who are on their social media accounts. That you and I know each other and have a simpatico relationship when I want it. But I am always in the control of deciding to switch that off and just be transactional with you, right? Tinder, just swipe left. And that has been disorienting to me till I figured it out. And now I break it down with my kids. I'm like, you have treated me transactionally after we have a relationship more than once. Adults cut off people who are like that because they're abusers. I don't let people into my life who abuse my trust and my relationships. So you have one more transactional relationship with me, and then we're done.
Yeah.
And I have parents that I feel a little bit away like that.
It's interesting you put it that way, because I can see where that really came into play with people's stances on various issues. I'm thinking about like the HB2 bill and certain other bills that have created around the country and everything, where you're right, people would basically, they had their viewpoint, and they would give you like one or two shots to show that you were an ally to some degree, but if you weren't an ally, then you were pretty much done, they were done with you.
Well, that's so true. I mean, if you have a different perspective, different values on something, today there's no listening, willingness to listen to that you see it differently. So where can we meet? Where is it that we can come to the center,
right,
rather than being totally opposed and beat you up? Literally beat you up because you don't think the same way.
Yeah.
And it seems to be more of that occurring. That doesn't set up a world for our children. And I keep going back to that because we're creating this world. And
because sometimes I wonder. Yeah, because you talk about kids and the way that they will be impacted. He seems like he's an innocent person within the conflict of what's going on around the world and everything. But I sometimes wonder about the younger child, not the older ones. They've already got their views and everything, and they're already shaped a lot of ways that their dad is. But I sometimes wonder, like, how is, and I cannot think of his name right now, I know it begins with a B, but the younger child of the current person in the White House going to feel and develop as a child, because he is still a youngster right now.
Well, I have one that's young, so I worry as well. And and I can tell you, in our household, right, like with the kinds of conversations that we're having, our young man started to demonize and have our president sort of as a boogeyman. And I was like, listen, I think that man is a very sad man. I would have him into our house for dinner because someone needs to be nice to him. He's a sad and lonely old man. That is clear. And if he knocked on our door and said, can you feed me, we would feed him. I just don't appreciate the job he's doing, nor do I think he's qualified to do the job he's doing. And I don't think he's handling his income. So we're starting to really talk about, like, I know in our house we've started to talk about the person as well. Because I think that this celebrity culture, you can forget that people you're talking about are people, are still people, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting, Commissioner Howerton, I think you know this man. He speaks glowingly of you. Kevin Leonard and I did, Mike Wiley's Blood Done Sign My Name at Raleigh Little Theater last year. And I had read that book, but it's different walking inside of a story. We played Martha and Vernon Tyson. And it was the gift of my life to sit inside of that marriage in my imagination. It made me a better wife. Martha Tyson made me a better wife just by how her example. But one of the things in that book, and I've really tried to embrace that because I like being the person who blows up. I really enjoy being the person who blows up a suburban wine party, that when someone says something stupid and doesn't know that two of my former students who happen to be tall black boys, that I'm a mother of children that that affects. And I really enjoy going, I'm sorry, perhaps you didn't know this. And I get a great deal of self-righteous enjoyment about that. And it's not effective. It's not effective because I can be in those spaces in ways that other mothers of black children cannot. And I can influence. And there's a great line in Ken Tyson's book coming from his father. He said, you cannot influence a person to change without first building a relationship with them. And I started to realize that my job, and I don't like it at all, is to continue to maintain and find the common ground with people I sometimes find mildly repugnant, because I am the only person who may be able to, and to hold my tongue. Woo-hoo! Those have been 2 lessons in vanity for me in the last 2 years. To just be like, cannot be right, but to stay present in the room so that I can be effective. And the other thing about Tim Tyson's book that he talks about, or that the being inside the story really embodied for me, is what's the cost you are willing to pay for change?
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's really where the rubber hits the road. You can talk and you can talk and you can talk. But when it comes to ante up, are you going to ante up your pride? Right? And my son saw that show that had almost 15 N-words in it. And my husband and I talked about it. And I was like, my son was 8 at the time. And we had considered adoption when we were first thinking about getting pregnant because we were older. And I said, if we had adopted the 3 young boys that we looked at, we were really considering, like on profiles, like these are people who have, who need to be adopted. I said, some of those children, we would have already had this conversation. So why are we not having it with the child who, in the situation when it arises, might have the most power to have their anger change things? This is not a conversation that needs to be had with black boys in America. This is a conversation that needs to be had with white boys in America, and we have one. So his family is going to be at that show.
Wow.
That's the cost our family is willing to pay because, and the privilege that we get to even choose, right? There are lots of families in this nation that don't get to choose.
Don't get to choose?
They just don't. And that's what a democracy is like when other people can't choose and we can, we join them. That's the point.
Well, my hat's off to you.
Yeah, you're doing some great stuff with your theater work and also just the way that you're making these very powerful presentations and having folks think about these issues. Because I think you've even done a couple of presentations that had to deal with kind of what's going on with our migrant community as well, because I know that's a big community and a big issue that folks are dealing with. And I know theater has touched your theater stuff has touched that as well, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yes, we were very, very fortunate. A young playwright let us do only one act of her show, My Mañana Comes. Unfortunately, our program, and again, who can take the classes, who's got access early, like all of those things, we didn't have many young men of Latinx backgrounds to do the show full out. Like I still struggle with diversity in our program at East Chapel Hill, and the cultural shift among young students and young families about the kind of people who do theater and their sexual orientation and whether doing theater will change your sexual orientation. That's still a thing I found out this year in talking with my students. I was like, yeah, I'm just going to start wearing a shirt that says theater doesn't turn you gay. It doesn't. As a matter of fact, most of the boys who join theater get a girlfriend. Okay. But that's, and you have to shake your head, right? Like that you go, I know this still, but that's where we are. So that's where we have to start. But Elizabeth let us do her show called My Mañana Comes, and it's about the levels of racism even inside of that community, right? Like that one of the things that happens when you squeeze a community, any community, whether it's teachers and pay or, any time that you have limited resources and you put people hemmed in, they start to fight among themselves for those resources.
Yes, they do.
And I think it's an effective tool, right? It's what broke up the labor movement and its real push in the earliest 20th century. That's kind of the game in this country. And I think we keep falling prey to it, right? And one of the nice things about being in a theater piece, this piece that we did, is, an African-American guy who is the head of this group of waiters wants both documented and undocumented Hispanic men to strike with him. He's like, it's our time to stand up. And they're like, we can't. And the two documented people turn on the two undocumented, right? And as an audience member, when you sit out and you watch those shows, you can go, oh, that's awful. But when you're in it, it's hard to see how you're being awful. I think that's one of the things that theater does. is it shows us how we're brilliant and don't know it, and how we're monstrous and can't see it.
Yeah. Can't see your own behavior.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and we've seen some very powerful examples of that in theater. Like you mentioned, the Tim Tyson book and play and all the stuff that Mike Wiley does. But I'm also thinking about The Best of Enemies, which of course is about Anne Atwater and her relationship with Mr. Ellis, who was a clan wizard, if I remember correctly, and they formed this friendship based on these things that they saw that were issues to both communities.
I quoted
what I experienced with that was I experienced pain, and I saw other people applauding. So it's different when you lived that. I lived that experience, and when you see it as just a story, it's totally different.
So in your case, it actually brought back some of the memories of what you remember going through, whereas other people were seeing it in a more.
I went through the water hose being turned on me, and marching down the street. So I've been there. I know it. It's like I can smell it when it comes anywhere near me. So I know that kind of mean, racist attitudes, and I just my spirit just know it, can feel it. So I'm either trying to disrupt it or run away from it.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's hard in educational theater to think about, right? So do you want to do shows that talk about history, right, and have roles for young men and women of color, but don't re-traumatize? I remember seeing Mike's piece that he did at Playmakers, and one of the things that I found remarkable about it, and I was so happy, is that they really made the violence about the people who are perpetrating it. Like the people who are being assaulted, the black actors who are being killed stood still, and you only saw in slow motion the white perpetrators. And that flip of like, this violence is not about the black bodies and you experiencing, again, black bodies having violence on them. This is about you having to look at people who look like you that ugly. And I thought it was a really instructive for me as an educator, right? That that maybe the more powerful thing to do is not to do Harriet Jacobs, right, on stage for young actors, but instead to, like we said with Sound of Music, we had an Asian student, we had an African American student, and I was like, if you can't figure out that they're brothers and sisters, the 9,000 times Sound of Music points out that they're a family, then I don't want you in my audience. If you're like, wait, it's an Asian kid and a black kid, I don't understand. How are they family? Go away. Don't come to the theater. I really say that about anybody, but no. You're not the kind of audience that I want to direct to. Maybe that's the way to go.
Yeah, because there's been whole conversations just where we're seeing people getting upset over certain folks playing what they consider to be a role that was originally a role of a European American. I'm thinking about what this whole conversation is with Beyonce and the role that she's playing now.
Well, that's also about the business, Mark. That's about the business. That's about if there are only 3 roles for white women, then go find a white woman. Because at that certain level, at the level of those business, those are business opportunities that don't come people's way, right? Where Beyonce is going to get tons of, well, not Beyonce, but does that make sense?
Yeah.
Particularly white men, right? Like Charlize Theron doesn't need to play everything. She doesn't. I mean, once you get to that level, it's really about, for me, it's the Deepak thing, right? like that this is a market that can only hold so much.
Mm-hmm.
And when the big giants are taking it, but there's no room for the little guy. Because if you're an unknown Asian woman, you're the little guy in the market. And so if there's one thing that says, hey, we need an Asian woman, maybe you should go look for Asian women. Now, I think it gets more complex at the community level, community theater level, and at the high school level. Because if you don't have those kids, then how do you tell the stories? Then it gets to be this, like, circular thing that I can't do ragtime. Hairspray, we're doing hairspray this year. And my white students are like, oh, do you think we have enough actors? I'm like, I don't know, but we're going to find out. I'm tired of not doing this show because we're afraid we don't have it. We were afraid we didn't have the Latinx men. We found them. You know, I think you get in that loop.
Yeah, definitely. But one of the things that I know you've been very much involved in the struggle with is how are we able to maintain the community theater? Because you just mentioned the DPAC, and, of course, there's the big shows that we get all the time. But our community theaters are oftentimes struggling. I'm not sure. I don't think Common Ground is still around. I know Man Bites went under. There's always talk.
No,
even in the arts world, the carriage is going
down.
down.
Those boys did their work, and they wanted to go be in love. And I go with God. I think that since Commissioner Howerton is here, I don't think you can put the horse back in the barn. But when you open a large venue like CPAC, what you can do is put pressure to say that those people need to give back to the community, right? That there are rehearsal halls that are free for a community theater underneath that. Right? That there are spaces, and that they make more than this much money in a year. If their profit margin goes up, you know, when you fund those things with city money, you can lay out some regulations that once they get big enough, they've got to start to build a ladder up. Right? That they have to have a grant program for emerging artists. You know, they have to run a summer training camp for young art, like that. There are things that you can do. I think that those projects are so big sometimes that people don't think about what their footprint is going to do to the local scene, right, afterwards. And I think it's also hard because people like me, I'm an educator, I'm busy, you know, I'm making my own art. Does that make sense? Like, we're not in the room. And nobody thinks to ask for us to be in the room.
And I tell you, that's the half of the battle is being at the table.
Right.
Having people at the table that can carry the ideas. So everybody can't be at the decision-making table, but somebody needs to be there and communicating that information back to the community. Because I totally believe that somebody has to let the community know what's going on.
Yeah, and you're right. It has to be that kind of community voice, and the community needs to have that voice. And that's across the board, whether it's something like the DPAC, and I agree that there are ways that they can be involved in the community level. But even sometimes our festival scene, I know a lot of people were very much concerned, and we had him on the show recently, when Suleiman bought the Art of Cool, that it was going to become more like this corporate kind of festival. But I do know that he's having conversations with people to make sure that there is a element of what is our local music community involved in it. It's not just him bringing down the acts that are the big national or international acts, but that there are other parts of it involved that play into what our local community is.
Right.
I think that's something that has to happen on a regular basis, whether that's the big festivals, whether that's the big venues or things of that nature, but or even supporting the local ones. Like I said, I work at the Hayes and I'm also on the board of the Carolina Theater.
Right. And I can't speak to the internal workings of it. I only know that as a Durhamite from the outside, Durham Central Park and its model, how it's come along and how engaged it stays in the community and how local those things. Durham Central Park to me seems to be a model that is taking from but also giving back. Now, obviously that's because it's a not-for-profit, but that kind of idea, like this is something that they definitely had input. They definitely left spaces for people to find a way in.
So has anybody had any conversation with around with DPAC in this conversation?
No, I don't know if they're physically set up for that, right? But I know that was a model when they started the place in Raleigh. There were definitely 2 or 3 theaters underneath that they were renting to local theater companies for a less than nominal fee. But who knows? Those are money makers. I know the Art Center in Chapel Hill also has had their ups and downs with being super open to the community and then being in financial difficulty and then tightening back up and then losing people who couldn't afford to use their spaces, right? But they've been up and down and up and down. I know that they've been very generous to the one company that has survived and, goes around. It's a high school company, One Song Productions. I only know what are the good spaces that are economical to rent because that's where they find a place to be. So wherever One Song is usually the amenable open space in the triad. You know that, Mark. They're right down the hallway from you.
Yeah, they're around the corner from me doing the when I'm doing the radio show and everything in WCOM. So yeah, they've done a lot of great work with the children and everything. How did you get involved with that? Because when you told me about their now they had gotten that space, I was just amazed that it was actually run by the children. So I don't even think I know you adults consult them, but am I not correct in thinking that they actually run that theater company almost to the person?
They don't consult with adults. There are many students who I've trained that are part of it, and I offer my consult whether they want it or not as students of mine. But no, they are a completely student-run organization, which I also think is fantastic. They get opportunities to do things.
Well, the way Durham is growing, I don't think there's anything that cannot be done.
Right.
It just takes the will and the dollars.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
Isn't that always the way?
It's always
totally.
the way.
And like I was telling Dee before I brought y'all on to the conversation and everything, I was just amazed this weekend because some third Fridays I'm busy at Hayti, so I don't always get to do the third Friday walk, but I didn't do that much of it, but I did go to the Truth and Power exhibit at Pleiades and went by the Art Guild and actually ran into a young brother that started his own studio called Riptown right there on Main Street, and apparently he's got his rent for what is relatively affordable for downtown. I think he told me he's paying like $25 or $26 a month, so that for downtown is actually not that bad. And so he was doing that and making that available not just to his space as a professional and artistic photographer, but also to others. Because I know Kevin Seifert, and who I think you know, Hope, and others were in there, and he had some musicians who were in there. So Kevin's work was up there, and then apparently once a month, maybe it's more than that, they're having like these community meetings among the art community. So they're forming like an art collective in that space downtown. But just being there in the downtown area, and like you said, Commissioner Howard, just seeing that diversity, because, I mean, there was all kinds of stuff going on. I want to say this was the weekend of the NA convention, so Narcotics Anonymous, and I don't know if it was their statewide or I'm thinking it was their statewide conference based on the amount of people I saw, but they were in the Marriott. There were people busting around at Unscripted up in the pool that they've got up there and having like some reggae playing. There was just people just of all classes, races, orientations and everything, just kind of like in downtown Durham, and it was just bustling on that Friday night.
So I think one of the things that we don't talk about, the value of the arts, is there's sort of an immune system for a community, right? That having a robust arts community helps you move through change in a healthier way than you would have without it. And I think that when we talk, like for me, again, thinking about arts as a commodification of the job is not where I find the value in the arts. And I don't think you can make that argument. I really don't. I think you can make the argument that that being an artist is part of your civic duty, that finding some way to contribute artistically inside of your community is just as important as voting, is just as important as mowing your lawn, that they're the maintenance of a civic society. It's the brushing the teeth of your community. And you need it.
Wow.
And I think that Durham has a robust community, and I think it's flagged some things for us that we've had to address. I mean, even the drumming community with the new apartment complex, that intersection made us go, whoa, what are our values here? How are we going to work this out? What are the laws? And do the laws work for this to be worked out? Right? The art of cool. Where should civic money go? And what's the kind of vibe we want in our city? And do we need to protect ourselves now that we're getting a little shiny? You know, nobody wanted to look at Durham sideways 15 years ago.
I mean,
now
really.
We're a little shiny, and people are like, look at you, girl. And do you want to really go out with that boy? Because he wasn't paying you any attention 15 years ago.
Now he think you're all cool and everything.
That's right. I was like, no. Why don't you go bring up Chapel Hill? No, sorry. I teach in Chapel Hill. I love Chapel Hill. So, but you know what I mean? That idea of like, well, maybe. But I think it's important. You need to have that culture, and you need to maintain that culture and keep it alive.
Hey, Commissioner Howard, she actually brings up an interesting point. How do we keep Durham's grit? Everybody loves Durham grit. Half of the T-shirts and everything else talk about Durham's grit. But how do we keep that grit and at the same time welcome all these folks that are coming in from New York, L.A., and everywhere else and not lose what brought them here in the first place and lose that energy that is the true Durham?
Yeah.
Wow. Yep. I
was just going to say something similar. Is how do we have downtown Durham, more inclusive? And that's what we're working toward right now with affordable housing. Is that so that people that don't make $1 million a year can live downtown?
But I also say it's the. No, go ahead, Commissioner Howerton. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just thinking about how the inclusiveness is so important in everything that we do because we start to exclude people. You know,
well, I think part of it is
that's. Go ahead.
The story we can tell. I will tell you, I owned a little girl house. I call it my little girl house. I owned a house as a single woman. I get 2 postcards a day asking me to buy that house. I rent it to a single graduate student for about $200 to $300 more than I could charge for it because somebody did that for me so I could buy that house in Durham. And that's the spirit of that house. So I also think it's about the story we tell ourselves about who we are as Durham citizens. For me, the story of that house is that's women helping other women or, you know, like at the time it was 2 women. But it's somebody, that house is for people who are getting their start. It is not for people to make their money. The 2 women took half commission so I could afford it. That's what that house is about. And if you then take that and say, that's what this house, that's what the House of Durham is about. I also think it's about the story we continue to tell ourselves about who we are as a community. And you just do it. That's who we are and who we choose to remain. Yeah. And then you just step up to that story.
You're right. We have to find ways to be innovative, which is what it sounds like you were doing with your old house. You were finding an innovative way to make that house affordable for somebody that might not be able to afford it. And it's also, sometimes it's also a matter of, I guess, standing up for what you got. Because, like I mentioned, the gentleman that bought the property in downtown Durham and is paying that rent apparently Subway at one point they wanted to move in there, and they wanted to, of course, go through his property. So he then went and got his attorney, who he, I guess, has on commission or whatever, and basically they were like, no, that means that you got to go through this apartment that I just bought fit, and I'm trying to turn into an art space, which is kind of going to ruin the vibe of what I'm trying to create.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Durham just has to learn. We haven't had a lot of opportunity to learn how to say no. And now we're a community that has to learn that no is about your values, too.
Yeah, but we don't have to take everything.
Right.
Right. Everything that's shiny and gold isn't necessarily for Durham or Raleigh or Chapel Hill, or they can go to other places as well. Because I'm oftentimes amazed, as you know, I hope I also do the Road to the Apollo with Captain Newborn, and we've gone to some small cities. I mean, we were just in Roxborough, and that was my first time ever being in the Caribbean. I was just amazed that this jewel of a theater is in downtown Roxborough, of all places.
Mm-hmm.
And the same with that theater. I've yet to go there yet, but friends of mine that have gone to Temple tell me that it's amazing, and that's in Sanford.
Oh, Temple was the first theater I ever worked at in North Carolina. I taught at Lee County for 2 years. I love that little theater. It's so special, and it's right in the heart of town, and it's like a heartbeat. It really is.
No, where is this?
It's in Sanford.
North
I think
Carolina.
It's right in.
I don't think I've been to that one.
Have you been to the Kirby yet, Commissioner Howerton? That's the one that's in downtown Roxborough. If you could call it that little small area downtown.
No, I have not.
Yeah, and then Henderson just put up a theater that's actually doing really well. I think it was built by the same people that built the DPAC. So it's McGregor, I think it's called the McGregor Hill or something like that. But it's right there in the heart of Henderson. So there's all these little theaters that are popping up, some that are holding anywhere from, I think Temple might hold like around 7 or something like that. I know Roxborough holds about 8 or 9. And I think the one McGregor might hold about like 1,000. So there's theaters that are popping up in rural North Carolina as well. And then in some ways they're becoming almost the economic engine of those areas.
Well, I will say,
been too busy.
Man by
pretty
Stog.
busy.
Yeah, I will say that Man by Stog was that for at least for the arts community that I was hooked into in Durham. Man by Stog, when they did their retirement party, Mark, you should go on. Lakeisha Kofi did a really beautiful video of everybody she had photos with, and it's just they raised 2 whole generations of artists, right? Like having something like that, Temple Theater, right? Like that it was a place for me as a young artist to go, and work, and that there should be a next level. Because, you can't be a 19-year-old who decides in community college, I think I like theater, and work at Playmakers and work at Burning Coal, right? You definitely need a stepping stone kind of place. And I think it's important for,
And that's one of my great fears, and I've seen it. That's one of my great fears, and I've seen it happen before. Fortunately, I think that Baba Chuck, when he passed, did a good job of passing the mantle on to others who are continuing his tradition. But I sometimes worry about, like, YPTC. Jeffrin is definitely getting up there in age, and I don't know if anybody's going to step into her void if and when she ever decides to retire. And there's others like that I sometimes wonder if there will be people that will step into that void. Because, I mean, Jeffrin has been in that basement of the Durham Arts Council for decades.
Right.
Multiple decades.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's tons of people who are working professionally that got their start with Jeffrin. Tons of people. It can't just be at the intersection at school.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I also don't think that it just has to be young people. I think that having a new space. I really do think that if the city wants to do something, finding a space that's subsidized, that's like Common Ground, it's really what this community needs right now. If there was the Common Ground space that was affordable and companies could afford a 6-week stint in there and you rolled through it. And that would be neat because then you could be like, that's what Common Ground was, right? Let's go to Common Ground. I'm going to see something. It's not the same thing, right? I'm going to see the next new thing. And sometimes it's going to be quirky, and sometimes it's going to be kids, and sometimes it's going to be this brand new professional company that's amazing.
Because that seems to be, in my mind, what seems to be missing around here. Well, two things. There's some people might think the other one is too big or too ambitious, but it seems to be when you talk to people, particularly in the music world, and I would even argue the theater world and to some degree the film world as well, it's like they find plenty of smaller spaces, I'd say 400 and under, which includes like the Haiti and the Arts Council, and then they find the spaces that are like 1,100 and up, which includes definitely like the things that the Central Campus and Duke Campus and the DPAC and the Carolina Theater, and well, DPAC's even bigger than that. But it's that middle space that people seem to be missing, as well as the grandiose space. So it seems to me that whenever I talk
where
to
you
people,
can afford to make your money back, right? Like where you can afford to, because if you're doing a show in a black box, the money just doesn't add up.
Whereas if you're doing it something that's $500 or $600, then the money might add up. And because if you're doing it at 1,000 seats, it's going to be too big. And even if we got the big amphitheater, which I know is in some people's visions, that's going to be like really super big shows because nobody probably can really afford those in the local scene. So it seems like we need that middle size in order to actually make the money back.
And the city could pilot it with an outdoor space that's like that, an outdoor, like the Forest Theater, right? Like a free space, like the Forest Theater, so that you could see if it's even going to grab traction.
Well, listen, I'm going to have to get off of this phone.
No problem. We've only got a few more minutes anyway, so I know everybody's going to get off shortly. But I know you have to get off, Commissioner Howerton. But before you get off, if people are interested in reaching out to you just to learn more about what you've got going on and to keep track of what you're doing and everything, I don't know when the next time that you're come around in terms of elections and everything. If people just want to keep in touch with you, what is the best way for people to reach you?
They can email me at B, like my name, Brenda Howerton, HOWERTON, at D as in Durham, DC, like cat, ONC, like North Carolina, .gov. So that's
appreciate you, and definitely would.
B Howerton at DCONC.gov.
And Commissioner Howerton, if there was something that you could request to every Durham citizen, because I'm a Durham citizen, I'm your constituent, that any one of your constituents could do to make your job serving us easier, what would that be? Is there something we can do to make your job easier?
That would be having conversations and with solutions, coming up with recommendations and solutions, and having a conversation about it.
Done. Got it.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Hopefully folks are listening.
To you with complaints. To reach out with solutions. I think that's a fine idea.
Yeah.
That is a great idea, and I appreciate you asking that question, Hope, because I was going there, and I definitely appreciate that. It's a great question that is definitely needed. I still got a few more minutes, because I may have a few more minutes of talking with you if Commissioner Howerton has to drop off. But before she drops off, why don't you give your email and contact information in case Commissioner Howerton or anybody else listening wants to reach you?
I'm just me at Gmail. I'm my full legal name, Hope Hines Love. HYNES, and it's Hope Hines Love.
HYNES?
HYNES. It's Irish. There are Hineses all over Galway.
Okay, Hines
at gmail.com.
Okay. Great.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate you being on, and I certainly enjoyed talking to you, so thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Great to talk to you guys. Bye-bye.
Good talking to you, too. Bye.
Have a good one.
Yeah. So, Hope, share with Dean and us some of the other theater pieces that you're really proud of, because I know you've done so much. You've mentioned a couple of them, but I don't know if there's one or two other ones.
I'm not going to talk about me. No. I'm not going to talk about me. I will talk about, you can go see David Henderson, directed by Jesse Gebhardt, at I Am My Own Wife. You can go see NRACT's production of Lady Day. Connie McCoy's in it, and I hear she's fantastic. You can go see some of my former students in Bright Star at Playmakers. They opened last weekend and run till next Saturday. And RLT is doing two things this week. They opened their student production of Antigone, which is a nice little tale of revolution for our time. And Lamar Jones is directing Dominique Merceau's Blood at the Root, and that is has roles for young black men and women and mid-30s, all ages. The casting breakdown is on RLT's website right now, and she's auditioning it tonight and tomorrow. So that's one to go be a part of. They go up in September, but they're auditioning that right now, and I would hate for anybody to miss that opportunity. So, that's what I'm going to do, because, whatever.
No, I have a question that has nothing to do with you. So let's put it this way. If you were to give a play that person that's sitting there in the D.C. area should go see to hopefully get him in the right direction, what would that play be?
Oh, playing right now?
Either playing right now, or that he can go see anywhere that he can pick up a book or a copy of it. Just whatever play you feel that he needs to watch in order to get him in a better direction.
That's a hard thing. So, where to start? There are American masters. There are things that are really easy to get into. I think Fences is one of the most accessible 20th century plays. August Wilson is just brilliant. I don't ever hear anybody read Fences that walks away not feeling like they have an understanding of that experience of being a wife or that experience of being a father or being a son and trying to get out from underneath, or family who's ill. I just think Fences by August Wilson is the most accessible. Now, who I'm reading right now, I have a giant young black women are ripping up the theater world right now. That's who I'm reading voraciously. Kirsten Greenidge and Lydia Diamond and Dominique Merceau. Dominique Merceau's stuff is just lays me on my backside. She's amazing. And I think that Justice Theater Project is putting up her, one of hers. No, Lynn Nottage. Lynn Nottage's Sweat is up next spring. If you're going to see anything, I think, as far as the quality of the script and the potential for that show to just be mesmerizing, Justice Theater Project Sweat next spring. Yep, that's what I would go see. She's our Pulitzer Prize winner. Lynn Nottage is amazing. So
she's definitely amazing.
Who are you reading and seeing right now?
I'm interested in seeing quite a bit. We've actually got Speed Done Killed My Cousin, which will be playing at Hayti in the 17th, and I believe the Carpetbagger Theater out of the Northeast is coming down to bring that. So I'm looking forward to seeing that, and there's a couple of plays that will be going on. I need to look at the list, but every 2 years I go to the National Black Theater Festival down there in Winston-Salem. The legendary Larry Leon Hamlin created that, and I have friends that were involved in the planning of that early initial stages. So that was formed in the late 80s, early 90s, but definitely looking forward to looking at that list and seeing what kind of amazing theaters just coming from around the world, because they've had plays that I've seen there from the Hittite Empire out of California. I've seen playwrights out of and theater productions out of New York, D.C., Atlanta. Even one year there was a company that was out of London. So I definitely have to go on that website, because it'll start a week from today. It'll be on the 29th is their grand opening, and then it'll run all the way until that Saturday, which I believe is the 5th. So they always have just amazing work.
They
So
run
you
the
saying
same
Hope?
time as the Women's Theater. So they run the same time as the Women's Theater Festival. So you can see something in Raleigh at the Women's Theater Festival, and then go to Winston-Salem and see something at the Black Theater Festival, which is kind of exciting that festival is sort of devoted to people who sometimes get shoved to the sidelines in the theater world. We have them both running in August in the state on either side of the state, which is kind of exciting.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you can see them because the Women's Theater Festival will run. Is that the same date, July 29th through August 5th, or will it be a little bit later?
They run all summer. They're sort of like a film festival. They put up things, and it's getting more and more expansive. It's a second or third year now, and they put up things all the way through July and August. Yeah,
So
pretty
there'll be some
remarkable.
amazing work, and you're right. It is good seeing folks that are doing that positive kind of things and that are oftentimes left out of the conversation by the mainstream and everything of that nature. Because, I'm oftentimes amazed at folks that are willing to make that automatic leap to New York or L.A. or wherever they consider the industry to be, when I think that we do some amazing work right locally, and that you can make it a whole career of doing this locally. You don't necessarily have to go to L.A. or New York. Nothing wrong with going to L.A. or New York if that's your vision, but I think that you can do a whole life and a whole career just around this area.
I think so too. I think it's a different. I think it's interesting. We were having that conversation at one of my friends' baby showers, one of the theater friends, and so there were lots of makers who had babies, and talking about that sometimes I think that we only consider high art when there's a lot of art that's happening in our homes and in our. I think that one of the most represented and under-respected kind of art is the stuff that's happening in churches. Yep. There's a huge amount of art happening out of our church communities that people don't think of don't give the respect that they should.
Yeah. And the other thing that you did, and you alluded to it earlier in the conversation, and I've mentioned, and I'll tie it back around to having a conversation about the owners of COPA, but you mentioned that you had thought about adoption, but you actually wound up having a child later in life. So I'm always glad to see when folks have that wish and are able to have that and that are healthy enough to do that, because I know Elizabeth was concerned about that because she's probably, I want to say Elizabeth might be around her 40s, and she's having her first child with her husband that owns Copa, which is the restaurant in downtown Durham. But, of course, he's had a child.
Well, tell her it was just the most intense yoga class I'd ever had. That's how I described it later. It was like the most intense yoga class I'd ever taken. Yeah. But, that's another place.
Go ahead.
With adoption, that's another place where economics, right, changed the kinds of choices that you did. The reason I decided that adoption wasn't something that we could do is, in doing my research, open adoption is psychologically the best for children. And it's harder on adults, but open adoption, a lot of the research shows that that's the easiest and most healthy way for an adopted child to sort of get a grasp on their identity and sort of avoid all the caveats of when it's a closed adoption and some of the psychological impact that can have. But for open adoption, you need to hire all 3 lawyers. It's unbelievably expensive, and there's absolutely no support for it. No state or federal support for the economic burden that an open adoption is. So it's why we decided not to go that way, is we couldn't afford it. If we'd had to do IVF or we had to do adoption, they were 2 routes that we were not able to afford, even though we were interested in both.
So you're interested in both, but we're only able to do the one route that was available to you and everything. But you're right. The adoption, and I think a lot of times people get caught up in not understanding about adoption or fostering or the different other things. I know before my brother had his 2 kids, he was actually a foster parent to a few kids. And I remember one of the greatest incidents I ever saw with a foster kid, but you'll get a kick out of this being a teacher, was the foster kid came to our household, my mother's household, and basically was trying to act out. Well, actually, she was not acting out. Her boyfriend was acting out, and my mom gave him a look, and basically it was that look that moms give people, and as we jokingly said on the ride back. I believe he was staying in Raleigh at the time. Was that was the most quiet we'd ever seen of that kid? Because I want to say she may have even said something like, I will take you out of here if you keep acting crazy and everything. But that look and that comment that she made, he was the nicest kid on the drive back, and that might have been almost a hour and a half drive back, or an hour drive back. But he was as quiet. He was quiet as a church mouse.
What I can say about teaching over the years is that that's all children really want, is someone who they know notices them. And it doesn't matter if you notice them. It matters if that they know that you notice them. And I think that extra step, sometimes I think we forget.
Yeah, you're very right about that. I do have to tell you, though, I am afraid of one thing that you mentioned in the show earlier, because, as you know, I'm very much busy in the arts and out in the world and everything. So I would be the kid or the adult that would be worried about a theater production that the lights are up, because if you do a lot in the arts, there are times in your life where the Sandman kind of comes and visits you, even though you want to be engaged in the theater. So I'm afraid that I would be the one that would get busted.
Well, I have fallen asleep at one or two productions myself. I have to tell you, I fell asleep on Broadway to Kill a Mockingbird. I thought that production was horrible. I saw it on Broadway. I was mad. I spent $180 to go see it. I was not impressed. I saw Hadestown in the same visit, and Hadestown was unbelievable. And To Kill a Mockingbird, that adaptation, I couldn't understand a word Jeff Daniels said. I thought it was horrible. So I feel you. And yeah, I was embarrassed that I fell asleep there too. Yeah, I was like, I just fell asleep at a Broadway show. I'm a theater teacher, and so I'm laying it all on the show. That the show is really bad.
The show is really bad. When you go up to New York, and I don't know how you go up to New York, do you get a chance to see the off-Broadway stuff? Because that's where I find a lot of great theater is the stuff that's not even on Broadway, but it's kind of off-Broadway stuff.
I do, and I try. If I can get any tickets to anything at the Public and Circle and the Square are the two that I go to. And see, that's the other thing. And don't get me wrong. Like, I love that musicals get people in to see the theater. They're super accessible. That's fantastic. Go take your 6-year-old to Matilda. But unfortunately, a lot of people think that that's the only kind of theater that exists. Right? There are lots and lots of people who, when they say I don't like theater, mean I don't like musicals. And I don't know if high school theater does as much as they could to dispel that, because you've got that marketing thing that you want to sell tickets and everybody will come to see a musical because they're accessible, but then you get this whole thing of like, so yeah, I think that there are lots of people who don't even know that the Public exists. So Public tickets are like, what, $50, $60? It's way cheaper. Like, if you think theater's too expensive, just go see a play.
Very much. You can go see a great play and everything. I remember, then we got to wrap everything up. My one theater experience that I remember was being in the drama department in high school and playing a family in a sea of cars. I want to say the teacher may have been a Durham teacher. For some reason, Haskell or Haskins is coming to mind. But he had us literally sitting up there, lining up 4 wooden chairs together to be the car, and we had to, pretend to open the door and be the passengers and the whole thing. And I'm sitting there going like, okay, this is kind of like a weird concept into getting to the theater, but it definitely showed me that you could create this illusion of being in a car, even though it's 4 wooden, and I'm talking about those old-fashioned wooden chairs lined up like 2 in front of each other and 2 in the back.
I'm an empty space kind of girl. I like to have, and maybe it's because I grew up in the Catholic Church, right? Like that so much of the Catholic Church is this thinky, imaginative projection of your spirituality. I like to be in an empty space with a whole bunch of other people and projecting images, making it my own, making it personal. I prefer not having it all spelled out for me.
Well, that's great. And I always great seeing you. I was glad that I saw you when I ran into you, and I've got to see another one of your productions soon. I know that you're friends of many of my friends as well, so I've definitely got to see you in a production very soon whenever you've got one, or see some of your students in a production. So I got to see what East Chapel Hill High is doing. That's the only bad thing about being mass transit is that it's not hard. It's not easy to get the things that are a little bit further out, like East Chapel Hill.
Yeah. Well, maybe we have to work on that connection, that Chapel Hill Durham connection.
Definitely have to work on that. That's one of my big gripes. I've lived in Durham, have yet to be to Sackville because it's also in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me.
I've thoroughly enjoyed having you. Dean, you got any last thoughts before we get out? And then I'll also tell you who we've got on next week.
Well, go ahead and tell us who we got on, and then we're going to rock from there.
That sounds like a plan, because next week we're going to have a woman on. Well, I'm actually looking forward to having on because I've been talking to her for a while. But she is actually facing terminal illness. But she's been going around traveling the world talking about facing this terminal illness and is having a joy of life that is just amazing. So we're going to have this woman from Wisconsin on named Lisa Ann Kretzik. And like I said, She is definitely facing a terminal illness. And as I put in our page, while none of us know our end date, sometimes tragedy happens, as Commissioner Howerton was just talking about. But instead of just dealing with this, she is coping with the disease by actually going around and trying to accomplish some of her life goals, including documenting weddings across the country from different religions, traditions, ethnic backgrounds, and economic levels. She's also understanding the importance of politics to those with a disability, and she's looking forward to and not afraid to speak out about that. So she's actually traveling the world now. I've actually been in touch with her on a regular basis on LinkedIn. She's actually posting some of the different things she's doing. I think she just posted one recently about some great pizza that she found. So, some people, when they know that they've got an incurable disease, they start like getting on that pity party kind of routine. But it looks like she is not having that whatsoever. So I'm looking forward to having this conversation with her and having her help other people that are going through these kind of things as well.
Indeed, and like I always say, you know what? When you walk outside your front door, man, it's your stage. Just make sure the people are not watching the rehearsal. With that being said, it's the six-man Dean Geronimo. Appreciate all of you for listening in. Make sure you catch the replay tomorrow night on the Skyhawk Radio Network at about 2 p.m. And then other replays on Radio Public, iHeartRadio, Google Play Music, Spotify, Spreaker, TuneIn, Stitcher, Podbean, Apple Podcasts, and CastBox. Make sure to catch us next Monday night as we are here once again. It's Straight Talk with Dean and Mark, and we appreciate it. Didn't we?